Hunter Biden's lawyer rages on Morning Joe with Joe Brzezinski, and he is not a very friendly guy, even to a friendly, in the Joe and Brzezinski show. We know that they're rabid anti-Trumpers. We know that Hunter's lawyers and many people in the media are constantly pointing to Trump, Trump, Trump every time anybody says anything about Biden or Hunter. And this was an interesting exchange because these are people who should be on the same side. And we watch what happens as Morning Joe interviews Abbe Lowell, Hunter's lawyer.
Federal judge in Delaware has dismissed misdemeanor tax charges against Hunter Biden. The decision had been expected following last month's failed plea agreement between federal prosecutors and the president's son. Special counsel David Weiss is expected to refile the charges or bring new ones against Hunter Biden in California or Washington, D.C. With us now, counsel of Hunter Biden, attorney Abbe Lowell. Abbe, thank you so much for being with us. What in the world happened? That was a mess. So we're about to get a deal.
What happened?
Suddenly it blows apart. Why?
Well, if you were in court or if you've read the reports, the principal issue, as you could see and hear, was a misunderstanding or disagreement between the two sides as to what the deal covered in terms of future possibilities. And so, Joe, there are three possibilities to why it broke down. The first possibility is that the prosecutors who wrote it, it's their document, didn't understand what they were writing and therefore weren't sure why it would be that we would want a firm commitment that this was the end of the investigation. The second possibility is that they actually did know but misstated to us that they had an agreement. Or the third is that they hoped nobody would understand and that it wouldn't be revealed that that's what they intended. And then they kind of dissembled in the courtroom. So you could pick that. But I can help you answer that three possibilities with the following question. What group of competent attorneys on the defense side would allow their client to plead to a misdemeanor on a Monday, knowing that the government could prosecute their client on a Wednesday for a felony? It would never happen.
So did the prosecutors act in bad faith? And if they did, why?
Well, as I said, you'll have to talk to them. I can give you the theoretical three possibilities. I can tell you that defense attorneys wouldn't do what they think happened. And so now you have to decide. But I don't know what they did.
I do. Everybody knows what they did. They all had some gray area in the plea deal and in the diversion agreement. They all had an unwritten deal, an unspoken agreement, and the judge called them out on it. They wanted to get it through because if they could get it through, then there was if they could just get the signatures on it and just get started, and this gray area wasn't exposed, it would have allowed them, if anything happened, to point right back to that plea deal and allege immunity regardless. They just had to get it done right past the gate. If they could squeeze it through, they were golden for the future. And the judge just happened to call them out, read the both documents, says, how does this work? And how does this work? And you guys want me to do this and do this? A lot of other judges may not have caught all of that, may have just signed off on it and turned it in. And if that would have happened, there would not have been a special counsel. They all were acting in a corrupt fashion, and the judge just asked them to explain. Both sides were in on it. It's not like these defense attorneys knew that there was this, couldn't recognize that there was this gray area. They knew it was there. It was all structured by design.
But I do know that there's only three possibilities.
Yeah. So Chairman Comer keeps going after Hunter Biden, and I must say he keeps embarrassing himself time and again. I won't even go through all of the missteps he's made, but I am wondering, what
do you mean, like meeting with the whistleblowers, exposing Biden crime family, all their bank records, hundreds of SARs, Gal Luft, all these people? What are you talking about?
You all considered having Hunter Biden testify in Congress before that committee?
I think that's just premature, but I think as you pointed out before your break and what you just said now, you have to have a serious congressional proceeding in order to consider having somebody like your client come. And there's been nothing serious about this set of proceedings. This is a set of Republican chair people who have done the least the following. They basically started by admitting that the whole point of their proceeding was, to use his phrase, move the political needle. Since then, they've basically said the reason the United States is helping Ukraine because of the bribes that occurred between the two. Then they have said that the reason that the Titan submarine news was suppressed was to cover up for the deal that was going to be announced for Hunter. Marjorie Taylor Greene used an oversight hearing in order to show naked photos of our client. Comer has basically just been bragging that he's the one, to use his phrase, who shoved the plea bargain up the you-know-what of the Justice Department. There have been allegations that there was a whistleblower, which turns out to be, first they said the guy was missing, and then it turns out that he is a fugitive and that he's involved in obstruction and being a foreign agent. With that,
that's Gal Luft, the same guy that the same DOJ is charging because he called them to blow the whistle on the Biden crime family. It's all part of the same corruption deal.
Panoply and laundry list of the things that these members of Congress have done, until they show that they have a serious intent, are operating within the rules, and have a proper legislative purpose, nobody would go before them.
Well, just to add a little meat on the bone there of their so-called informant, beta agent of Communist China also tried to smuggle Iranian oil illegally to the Communist Chinese Party. So, yeah, they have a rich cast of characters. I'm curious, they're obsessed with connecting Joe Biden with some of these business deals. Is Devin Archer correct that Joe Biden got on the phone in some of these meetings with Hunter Biden and the business associates overseas?
I think the better answer to that question is everybody, I think, now knows that President Biden speaks to his children and his grandchildren frequently, almost every day.
Almost every day. Put a pin in that. Almost every day. They speak almost every day. They've been doing that for years.
And I don't think it's unusual, whether it's at a family gathering or perhaps when Hunter was at a business meeting, that would happen. And if there was any conversation, as is Mr. Archer's point, it was like chit-chat friendly, like, how's the weather? So it had nothing to do. Look, one of the things Congress has done with all of their staff and all of their power and all of their gavels is to try to make a connection between the president and any business dealing of a private person called his son. They haven't been able to do that. And back to your other point, one thing people should understand, if they are paying attention, and I hope they are.
We are, yeah.
That in terms of the investigation at the Justice Department, what gets lost are the following two things. First, this was a Republican-started investigation run by a Republican U.S. attorney who had 5 years to look at every transaction that could possibly occur. And at the end of that, decided that the only two proper charges would be a failure to file misdemeanor and a diverted gun charge for when Hunter possessed a gun for 11 days, which was never loaded.
That all is a conclusion that people say is corrupted. What's the evidence of that? 2 IRS whistleblowers, Gary Shapley, Joseph Ziegler, and an unnamed FBI supervisory special agent who confirms and corroborates their statements. So that's the point. Like, they come out and they say, oh, the conclusion says there was only these two things. No, that's the corrupt bargain that was the excrement from David Weiss's inquiry.
And so after 5 years with no motive to turn the other way to any wrongdoing, that's what they thought was appropriate. People seem to forget the other important point, that when they came to that conclusion, that was after Hunter had already paid his taxes 2 years before the events occurred this last year. And that gets lost in the wash as well.
Well, what he's talking about is that, Hunter, has these very harsh charges that are brought upon him, and he neglects that there were dramatically more serious crimes that he could be charged with, hundreds of SARs and all of the other things. And he's still saying that this is just too much. Hunter should have not even been charged for this because he already paid the taxes. Well, the bigger crime is, and first of all, that's not even true, right? He had other statute of limitations expire for other criminal charges in 2014 and others.
How many people actually get charged and convicted for these misdemeanor tax charges? Would that have happened if his last name were something other than Biden?
A point on this, if that was the original charge, if your original crime was what Hunter is pleading to, they probably would give you a diversion deal. They'd give you some of an offer. So you wouldn't be charged with that crime and then also plead to that crime. You would be charged and then diverted into something lower. It's a deal, right? You get a high-level DUI, you negotiate it down to a reckless driving, whatever. Same thing here. So the answer is that, yeah, probably a lot of people are not originally charged and convicted on that level because they're diverted into a better deal. Hunter got from aggravated murder. Hunter got a DUI with kids in the car, third offense, blood alcohol content, let's say 0.35. Also cocaine, we'll call methamphetamines, heroin, and other things in his blood system. Crashed into a building, killed somebody, fire hydrants going off. Kids are screaming all over the place. It's madness. That's his criminal charge. And then they divert it all the way down. He gets a plea deal, speeding ticket, 56 and a 35, civil offense, 3 points on your license. Oh, man. Yeah. So that's what's happening here. And then they're saying, well, that, nobody gets speeding tickets for 56 and a 35 on that road. Nobody gets that. That's really harsh.
Well, here's the statistics that I think you're raising, which is the following. There are millions, literally millions of Americans who file their taxes late or don't file them at all. And they don't get charged with criminal offenses.
That's not what Hunter did. Hunter structured multiple LLCs and tens of millions of dollars. He didn't file his taxes late.
Didn't get the opportunity to fix it by paying a fine and paying interest. There have been those who have said that Hunter Biden has been given a favorable deal by the prosecutors. It is very likely that if his name wasn't Biden, it could have come out different. But I want to say that when it was brought to his attention and it was a way to resolve the issues, Hunter was very willing to accept responsibility for the mistake he made in late filing. It doesn't cover the fact that so many other people would do that and don't get charged criminally, but that doesn't undermine his desire to both put this behind him and to accept proper responsibility. But for those who would say, oh, this was some sort of sweetheart deal, they should really look at the statistics and see how he was charged charged when others would not be.
Yeah, we would like to see the statistics. Yeah, how many other people are charged with structuring LLCs and hiding millions and millions of dollars in the way that he did with, the SARS reports and the structuring of the Owasco, Rosemont, Bohai Harvest, all of them. They would be charged. They would be in prison, but he never even got those. Late filing.
And we've been talking this past week about Steve Ratner came on, showed charts. Jerry Kushner ended up getting about $3 billion for his fund. Only 1% of that from American investors, most of it coming from Saudi Arabia. Unprecedented. And of course, we've been drawing the connection to the fact that he worked in the White House, and that's one of the reasons he got that money, and perhaps the only reason he got that money. $7 million ain't $3 billion.
You see how that works? So before he asks him a hard question about $7 million, he's got to pre-frame this question. Trump's really bad. Everybody in Trump's life is the worst. Jared Kushner, blah, blah, blah. But I also need to ask you about this $7 million. So can you tell me about that?
At the same time, I think Americans are asking, what did Hunter Biden think he was getting that $7 million for? Why would he be getting paid so much money?
Here we go.
All right, well, stop with your $7 million and talk about how many years that Hunter has been in business and what happened to each of those specific years. When you say it that way, people think that somebody just sent him a check for $7 million on April the 1st.
No, but help me out here again. And I'm glad you're here to actually break this down. Obviously, Jared raised his $3 billion very quickly.
Yeah,
we have numbers being thrown around. The $7 million is actually not what Comer's saying. Comer has a much higher, much more elevated number. I guess the Washington Post reported it was $7 million. What's the $7 million over, and how many countries did it come from?
Well, okay, so first of all, it's much more complicated than to say it comes from countries. Yeah. There are joint ventures between American entities and, in one or two occasions, a potential foreign entity to create the possibility of jobs and energy in the United States.
Jobs
That's
and energy.
Too complicated to try to explain, but I can answer the question that you asked in the following way. Over the time that he was in business, this is, again, something that people ought to pay attention to. Hunter Biden went to Georgetown University, went to Yale Law School, was on the board of directors of a bank, was on the board of directors of Amtrak, is somebody who went and worked in an international law firm. People seem to forget that this is not the person who's simply out there having people write checks for no reason. He's a capable, educated, experienced person.
Drug addict, crackhead.
If Congress wants to start saying, wait, does he get opportunities because his last name is Biden? They should look to themselves. I mean, Senator Joe Manchin's wife is on a commission in West Virginia where Congress had provided an enormous amount of funds. There is Congressperson Boebert, who has a spouse that works in the consulting business. If you start dissecting people who have the ability to use their connections and their name in order to get an opportunity, then okay, but then what's good for the goose, good for the gander? Congress should look at their own. People have been doing this for millennia. Maybe it's not fair to us who don't have the name, but that's what happens. And the most important point is that it's not improper and it's not illegal. And the thing that's different, and you just said it again, is that Hunter Biden has never been in a family business like the Trump kids, and he's never acted as an advisor to the president in the White House, using both of those in order to then conduct business. That's a fundamental difference that also ought to be remembered.
Yeah, he's got the Biden name. We don't. Good for them. Not so good for us. Not illegal. The fact that they're just grifting millions of dollars, exchanging foreign policy decisions for $83,000 a month from Burisma in exchange for firing a prosecutor. None of that's that big of a deal, okay? You wish you were a Biden. This guy makes you sick. All right, so we'll leave him there. Now, okay, that's the Hunter lawyer. And they have, in the court in Delaware, filed to dismiss the tax charges. And I'll briefly share with you exactly what that looks like. You see, this is the order that is dismissing the tax charge. Now, this is been dismissed without prejudice, which means they can refile it. And the government has indicated that they will refile it. They say that in the motion. The judge is including that as part of her finding. It says the government has said venue is improper. Venue is supposed to be waived pursuant to the plea deal. There is no plea deal. There's no waiver of venue. Means we're in the wrong court. Means we got to go to a different court. So the government has moved to voluntarily dismiss the information without prejudice so that the United States can bring charges in another venue. So the government requested it. Hunter's lawyers agreed to it. Judge Mary Ellen Norica and ordered it dismissed. Now, my question on this is the government actually going to bring the charges back at a later date? We know there has been a special counsel that's been appointed now. And so how long before the charges get resubmitted in another jurisdiction? We'll see if ever. Now, there was another filing. This also came came from the judge, says that Hunter moved to seal certain exhibits. You remember this. This was a battle where Hunter's defense team allegedly tried to remove the amicus filing from the House Ways and Means Committee. They submitted this big document. Hunter's team apparently called the clerk of the court, tried to get it removed off the docket. Representative Smith opposes the motion to seal. They wanted to seal it. Court says there is a presumptive right of public access to this stuff. Sorry, Hunter. There is a strong presumption of openness. A party seeking to overcome the presumption of access bears the burden showing that secrecy outweighs the presumption of openness. To overcome that presumption, you got to find some strong findings, specific findings on the record about the effects of disclosure. They say broad allegations of harm, not sufficient enough. And the representative says that these have been public for a long time. So the judge rules, because Hunter Biden failed to make any showing of specific harm from having these documents be public and has failed to address the documents sought to be sealed on an individual basis, it is hereby ordered that Hunter Biden's motion to seal is denied. The materials by Representative Smith, the amicus, shall be unsealed in their entirety, which is all good news. Those were already publicly available, but Hunter just wants to keep this stuff sealed. The judge obviously rejected that request. So here is James Comer responding to some of this, explaining what he has done to go continue his investigation into the Biden crime family. One of his recent releases was the fact that Joe is using pseudonyms to conduct his business.
Giving you the money, is that the same day?
That's it.
And that would be the day. Now, as a result of that firing, did his son financially and get paid on the Burisma board for a job at a time he was a drug addict and a time that he was also admitted in his own work?
It's all a pattern here, Sean. This is something we've been talking about for a long time. The Democrats and their friends in the media try to say there's no connection to Joe Biden. Every day there's more connections. And I think these emails today are consistent with the timeline. It shows exactly what the real quid pro quo was in Ukraine. It was Joe Biden, not Donald Trump.
The WhatsApp message is very revealing. I'm sitting here with my father. Why didn't you keep your commitment? We expect a call from you. Wasn't that sent to a oil executive with CEFC, the Chinese energy giant?
Yes, it was. And remember, that WhatsApp message was produced by the IRS whistleblowers. This was the IRS International Tax Crimes team. This was the A team investigating all these suspicious wires, this suspicious activity that the Bidens were getting from foreign nationals around the world while Joe Biden was sitting vice president influencing foreign policy. That's why the whistleblowers were so frustrated when they were told to stand down, because they said their investigation was clearly going straight to Joe Biden.
Let me ask you this, that 1023 form that the FBI desperately tried to keep from you.
And see, you look at that 1023 form that alleged the bribery. It's consistent with what we've seen in Romania. It's consistent with the timeline that you and John Sullivan have documented on your show tonight. And I believe that one reason that Hunter was CC'd on those emails where Joe Biden was using a fake name is so Hunter could prove to the Ukrainian oligarch, look, help is on the way. Because we heard from Devin Archer say that the owners of Burisma were squeezing Hunter Biden, saying we need help from Washington. Now, who do you think they were referring to when they were talking to Hunter Biden, who they've said was dumber than their dogs, who was a drug addict, who had no experience? We need help from Washington. Who do you think they were talking about? And here we see now evidence that shows Joe Biden didn't have a wall between the government and his son's shady business dealings. He was copying him on foreign policy to let him know ahead of time, help is on the way. We're going to go in there and we're going to fire that prosecutor who's trying to bust you for corruption, son.
Amazing. So the pseudonyms and all of the different connections, the emails, I mean, they had to communicate, and obviously they were doing it in nefarious ways. Stuff was getting done. Feels like the dam is starting to break as these connections are being made. Jake Sullivan's having a rough time, probably been running around the alleys, the gutters, wherever Hunter Biden is, picking up the cocaine falling out of his pockets. Got asked a question about this. Says, hey, Mr. Jake, does the administration, the Biden administration, just as a reminder, Jake Sullivan went to Oxford. Okay, very smart guy, evidently. And he's also the national security advisor, which means national security and foreign affairs sort of matters, kind of within his jurisdiction. Question for Jake. Does the administration view the Hunter Biden investigation as legitimate? And is the administration concerned that Hunter Biden's ties to China pose a national security issue? Given the fact that, this is the national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, here's what he says about all of that.
Republicans in the House Oversight Committee are currently investigating the Biden family's ties to foreign entities. They have specifically pointed to Hunter Biden's financial ties with China. Does the administration view this investigation as legitimate? And is the administration concerned that Hunter Biden's ties to China pose a national security issue?
I don't have any comment on that.
Republicans in the House.
What is all that education for if they can't even answer a simple question like that? Well, that's Jake Sullivan for you. So he's been in the government for quite a long time. That's who is leading us into national security, doing our advising. Now, what is interesting here is that the Democrats and many on the left, they want direct deposits and check slips and other receipts with Joe Biden's signature on it with a little heart and, sniffles or something on there. I don't know. But what about the fact that Joe Biden has been lying to us repeatedly in debate after debate, in appearance after appearance, lying directly to our faces? We know that he talks to Hunter all the time. They told us like once a day, regularly calls into business meetings and all of these things. But why did he tell us definitively that Hunter didn't make any money from these deals if we know that he did? Didn't Daddy know what Hunter was spending his money on? He didn't ask about other things other than the weather, like where'd you get that car that was apparently paid for by a foreign individual to the tune of $142,000 wired over and then wired to a car dealer? Dad didn't ask any of these questions every day they talked, and he in fact told us the opposite, that he was not getting paid specifically.
And Kristen, Glenn Kessler from the Washington Post had a fact check about Joe Biden from earlier this month, noting that Hunter Biden admitted in court in July that he was in fact paid substantial sums from Chinese companies. Kessler wrote, Hunter Biden reported nearly $2.4 million in income in 2017 and $2.2 million in income in 2018, most of which came from Chinese or Ukrainian interests. But this directly goes against what Joe Biden said in the debate in 2020 with Donald Trump. Take a listen.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China.
None of that is true. He made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
that is simply
and various
not
other places.
true.
Lie.
So it's from two different debates, but I mean, Trump was right. I mean, he did make a fortune from China, and Joe Biden was wrong. I don't know that he was lying about it. He might not have been told by Hunter, but this blind spot is a problem.
It's a problem.
Yeah, it's a blind spot. Yeah, it's just a blind spot there, Jake. He's just like so busy working to save America. He's like a senator and a vice president. He's like working on Ukraine corruption. That's what Joe Biden's working on. Ukraine corruption. Can't even see what his son's doing during his daily phone calls because it's just a blind spot. Who else gets the benefit of the doubt of blind spot? Do you think that any J6ers had a blind spot, got caught up in a blind spot in a moment of emotion? No. Any blind spot benefit of the doubt for Trump? No, of course not. But tens of millions of dollars coming into the Biden coffers via Hunter Biden exploiting his daddy's position as VP. Well, and lying to us about it, right? Hunter or Joe Biden lying to us, not saying, I don't know where my son gets his money. I don't know. No, he says he doesn't get it. Turns out he does. Just a blind spot though.
Problem one, because Republicans aren't going to let it go. That's for sure. But also these problems are continuing through the legal system. It's not as though this is something that's been settled in other jurisdictions and Republicans are just harping on it. It is an ongoing thing in our courts. It's not going anywhere.
This is a blind spot. Does it concern you as a Democrat?
Well, I think dads have sometimes, and parents sometimes have blind spots about their kids, for sure, and the president may be no exception. But
yeah, Hunter, like that first joint that he had under his pillow or something like that, maybe that was a blind spot. But, a whole career of prostitution and being in and out of treatment centers, so many, in fact, that they wouldn't even admit how many it was during his plea deal. The judge said, how many times has he been in treatment? And the defense was like, a lot, Your Honor. Like, I don't know, a lot.
nothing has tied the president to any of Hunter Biden's dealings. There's
no, it's not just the copied emails. It's not the phone calls. It's not the golf events. It's not the dinner photos. None of that.
Of him being involved or him being implicated in it. And it's, I think it's not something the voters care a lot about.
All right, we'll see about that. Yeah, just little blind spots for these individuals who are defending the Bidens until the end of the days. And of course, there will be much more to come on that. We've got Hunter's lawyer very upset with Morning Joe for asking about the $7 million. Comer says we're continuing to investigate this. James Tapper finally admitting, Jake Tapper admitting Trump was right. Biden did in fact lie. And so my friends, we'll continue to cover. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for following along. Thank you for liking this video wherever you're watching it. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.